Hey guys, it's Dr. Argie again here. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We're just getting started, but welcome to Courageous Conversations Connect series. This is our second week, guys, and this is Mindful Mondays. Well, in Mindful Mondays, you guys had it on Friday. We had Freedom Fridays where you said what you wanted to talk about, and we decided based on your comments that we were going to talk about what's coming up, which is the election. So remember, I said that this is a monologue. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. And we're here for you. So I'm Dr. Argie, founder and CEO of Faith Inc. that stands for Family and Individual Therapeutic Healing, and co-founder and CEO with my lovely husband, Morgan E. Wilson Jr. of Connections Matter, LLC. So I hope that you guys can sign on. We're going to have a really juicy, delicious conversation about how we get out and vote. But interestingly enough, today we're going to be combining what it looks like to think about our social consciousness when it comes to voting. And guess what? Yeah, you guessed it, mental health. Because of course, Dr. Argie would be talking about mental health, right? So our topic today is maintaining our mental health in the era of toxic politics. Interesting. And we've got, oh my goodness, Tyrone is on. Hey, little bro. We're talking about politics. Why? Because the elections are coming up soon and we need to get out and vote. But we also need to be healthy in everything that we do, because then we can make good, right decisions, not only for ourselves and our families and our communities, but our livelihood depends on who we vote in office. So this is a dialogue, not a monologue on Mindful Mondays. So I want to hear what's in your mind. I want to hear what you're thinking about when it comes to this conversation about maintaining our mental health and our mental well-being in the era of toxic politics. Well, it's been, I can't believe it, it's been a couple years since 45. A couple of years. I didn't think, to be honest, that we would make it past a couple of weeks, and it's been a couple of years. And our politics have gotten even nastier than I thought that they were 2 years ago. It's become pretty much like reality TV. We're not nice to one another. We are in the era of social media, which means that we tend to see everything, anything and everything on a constant feedback loop of this news media, right? It's social media, it's news media, it's TV, it's radio. We're constantly talking about what's going on. And Andrea's on. Hey, Andrea, thanks for joining us. Tell me what you think about the subject of how to maintain mental health and mental well-being in the era of toxic politics. Well, this is a dialogue, not a monologue, and this is what I think about politics. It's really interesting that politics was supposed to be, my understanding, for public service, right? The goal of politics was for have people to come into office, we vote them in the community, to serve us, the people, right? And somewhere along the line, politics moved away from being about public service to, interestingly enough, being about power and control and money and greed. And yes, now we're talking about politics as it relates to what the best way I can describe it is the reality TV show, right? Number 45, who was basically a media personality, has now become our president. And there's interesting phenomenon going on at almost every single day. So I don't know if you all saw the clip with Kanye West last week when he was in the Oval Office and he had a rant. If you listen to the whole entire clip, he had some pretty decent requests. He just didn't know how to execute them. And much of that, I think, had to do with his mental illness, because he says that he has mental illness. He admits that he has bipolar disorder. Seemed like he was in the manic state right about then, but I don't know that for sure. What I know is that abolishing the 13th Amendment is not a good idea. I also know that, some of the things that he said, he just sort of went on and on and on without a whole lot of rhyme or reason. And what was interesting about that was I kept saying to myself, I don't know, you all tell me what your thoughts were. I kept saying to myself, who loves him? I know that Kanye's mom loved him. She died many, several years ago. I know that he's married. I know that he has a family and children who loves him enough to share with him that going to the Oval Office and ranting while you're in a manic state is probably not the best thing to do. Not only for us, but it's not the best thing to do for him. That rant spoke to, quite frankly, what I thought was mental illness, and it spoke to not good decision making. Here's also another interesting fact. When I watched it, Donald Trump, number 45, stayed silent. When have any of us known this man to keep silent? Which then told me that the optics of all of that was for political gain. And it was exploitation at the highest level. But really what I want to talk about is not necessarily Kanye West, or any other politician. I want to talk about us, regular people. I've never, ever met a person that did not have, if they live long enough, some mental health condition. So I want us to think about this. Think about if you had a common cold. Most of us have a common cold or are susceptible to getting a common cold. Why? Because we're human beings and we're susceptible to whatever is in the elements, what's in the atmosphere. Think about this from this perspective. Because mind, body, and spirit is all connected, right? Then our body is not disconnected from our mind, and our mind is not disconnected from our spirit, which then means that we have the ability to have possibly a mental illness or a mental health condition. So it's just easier for us to think about our physical health conditions versus our mental health conditions. But that's real, and that's very, very dangerous if we think that none of us are susceptible, because mental illness is real, and it's real for all of us. And the sooner we destigmatize it and we start normalizing mental illness, the better off we'll be, because then we'll be open to accessing the resources, therapy, for example, psychiatry, medication if we need it, even a spiritual advisor or someone to talk to. There's multiple things which we're going to get into that we can do to maintain our mental health and our mental well-being. And then the combination of that, and it was interesting, as our team, we were debating on how do we integrate this, because in all reality, our mental health is, I believe, directly correlated with what's going on in the political terrain right now. Think about it. 365 days out of the year, 24/7, we're on a news loop, feedback loop, right? Where we're constantly watching toxic energy, paying attention to negative messages, when we're paying attention to really anger and bitterness and vitriol, and it's affecting us, it's impacting us, and many of us are becoming depressed because we become these voyeurists. And if we're honest, most of us will be willing to watch the train wreck because it gets us out of our own heads sometimes, and it gets us away from what our own issues are. What are your thoughts about that? When we think about, I want to ask you a question. When is enough enough? And I want some of you to try to answer that for me as I answer that, because one of the things that I think can be helpful for many of us is to begin to sanction or bracket the amount of energy that you spend listening to TV or radio or social media or political news that is really like watching a bad movie over and over and over again without the benefit of our health and well-being. So when is enough enough? How do we begin to bracket some of that, sanction some of that? How do we begin to step away from it? When quite frankly, it could be pretty infectious, right? Because some of us are willing to watch the train wreck rather than deal with ourselves. And then how do we maintain our own mental health? And specifically, how do we resist while simultaneously being resilient? We're resilient people. Tyrone is on. Hey, Tyrone. He says, hey, big sis. Andrea's on. I see Tiffany. Tiffany's on. Listen, we are resilient people. And it's important for us to resist, but it's important for us to resist for the right thing. This is the Courageous Conversation Connect series where we're talking about Mindful Mondays. What does resistance look like? Many of us tend to not have this or think we have this internal power because sometimes we've been rendered voiceless. Well, why? Why are we rendered voiceless? Sometimes we don't feel like we have the power. Sometimes we don't feel like many people are listening to us. Sometimes we feel like that we've done everything that we could do to be good citizens, and we even showed up to vote, and then something bad happened. We didn't get the candidate that we voted for, and so we've stepped it back out of the arena. I want to say to all of us in this courageous conversation that you got to stay in the game. You got to get in there and you got to work and advocate and vote, right? Because if you don't, then one, you can't complain, but two, there's then no hope. And where there's no hope, sometimes we perish and we go deeper and deeper into a mental health condition. So listen, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Some of you are listening in on this conversation, but remember, we said this is a dialogue, not a monologue. So I want us to think about, if many of us are riddled with anxiety, what does that look like to, as some of us have anxiety busters? What does it look like to decrease our anxiety and increase our calm in this political terrain? Because the news is going to keep us watching. And quite frankly, the way that our culture is now, with all the energy that is negative, it's going to keep us connected to the negative energy and not the positive energy. I see Tiffany said, should we watch the news less to help with anxiety? That's a good question, Tiffany. Of course, we need to watch the news less, but what does that look like if we do sanction ourselves? And I would say, to add to that, as we're decreasing the amount of news that we're watching, what are we increasing? Because in order to when we decrease something, that creates space. So then we have to increase something. So what do we increase it, or what do we add to in our lives that creates positive energy and mental health and well-being? I would say journaling is wonderful. I would say, find something that you like to do. For me, it's nature. So I love nature walks. I would say meditation can be really, really helpful to calm the energy in our brain and the negative energy in our brain. And then it also emits chemicals called oxytocin and dopamine that really helps us to decrease the negative energy and increase the positive energy. I'd also say, pay attention to who your crew is, right? So that's a good segue, because I want to invite you to join our crew. Crew stands for Connecting Relationships for Epic Wins, and we're all a part of the crew here. I've got my whole team here helping me out with this, but we're going to be a part of the crew where we're going to be doing more things. We're going to be having master classes on healthy relationships, single moms, couplepreneurs. So look out for all of the advertisements for the master classes that we're going to be launching, because they're going to be amazing. So some of you may want to come to therapy, and other people might want to take a class. We're here for you. And so think about joining our crew. Remember, we're going to be doing more of this every single day. We're going to be engaging with you on these Courageous Conversation Connect series. And at the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about what I want you to do, because again, not only is this a dialogue and not a monologue, but this is a relationship that we're forming. And in that relationship, I want us to grow together. Tiffany enjoyed that. I like that. Tiffany, you enjoyed that. You thought that was good. Well, listen, for those of you who are engaging in this conversation with me, let me know what your thoughts about. What are your thoughts about Kanye West? What are your thoughts about, interesting enough, it's football season, right? And we know that Kaepernick took the knee, and he made a lot of waves, and some people didn't like it. Even 45 didn't like it. And now, it's what do we think about a culture where we can't stand up for our own civil rights and our own social justice? Back in the civil rights era with MLK, people really stood up, right? They put their lives and their families on the line to stand up for justice and fairness amongst all people, no matter what color, no matter what race, no matter what sexual orientation, no matter who you were and how different you were, that the civil rights movement was about inclusivity, right? And I'm now calling it the inclusion revolution. What will we stand up for? How will we work towards our common good? Because again, this is about our mental health and well-being in the era of toxic politics. But if we're so depressed and we're so overwhelmed and we're so anxiety-ridden because of what's going on in the political terrain, then we're not going to be able to stand up for ourselves, and certainly we won't be able to stand up for other people. So I'm interested in hearing if our crew has any other questions that might be a part of this conversation. Any questions you guys have?
Yeah, so we have one.
Okay, Britt's got a question for us.
So, how do you phase out individuals who add more stress and anxiety to your life?
Ah, that's a good one. That's a good one. You know, what's interesting, we're embarking on November, and the question is, how do we phase out individuals who are negative and who are just creating negative energy in our lives, right? That's a hard one, because interesting enough, sometimes we are loyal to a fault, right? And sometimes our loyalty is because we've been in a relationship for so long. Sometimes our loyalty is because we fear what's going to happen if we lose that person. We're going to be doing a whole series on our fears that's going to be coming up soon, so look out for that one. But when we think about relationships, sometimes I like to say we tend to keep people way beyond their expiration date. And I'm going to give you a graphic. This is a little graphic, this example, but I think you'll follow me on this. Think about if your carton of milk, if you like milk, and it has an expiration date, and the expiration date was, let's say, July 2017, right? And you drink that milk, what will happen? You get sick, right? So why then do we keep people who don't mean us well or who are really negative in our lives far beyond their expiration date? I'm not suggesting that we totally cut people off, but I am suggesting that if people are not giving you positive energy, if they're dream squashers, if every time you say you have a dream or hope or wish or, or your aspiration, they shoot it down, they become the dream squashers, if you will, then maybe it's time to relocate them. And usually the end of the year is a great time to think about who adds to my life, who subtracts from my life, whose life do I add to, and whose life do I subtract from? And from that perspective, then it may be time to start relocating some folks that are going to speak life, speak truth, and speak it with a care and a consideration for your well-being so that you can be in a healthy relationship. I see a few other people, and I think it's Marcade is on. Hey, Marcade, how are you? I want to see if I can bring this down to see if other people are on. Tiffany says, how do we protect our mental health dealing with politics? I can't help but to have or think it's us against them mentality when I'm looking at all these posts and comments from our current White House staff. I feel attacked. Interesting. That's a good question, Tiffany. I think a lot of us feel attacked when we talk about the tweets that are coming from 45. Remember when our president, I still call him my president, Barack Obama, was in office. I don't even think they allowed him to use social media the way that our current president is doing now. And I think I think that would have been much more positive. And so yet we have a current president in the White House that is using the social media platform to divide, to create tension and discourse and conflict, and quite frankly, to set us back. We come so far with regards to our sense of humanity for one another. And what he's done and the persons that support him has set us back, because we really are all a part of one race, the human race, that has multiple hues, and they're all beautiful. And we can figure out a way to find common ground so that we can support one another in this place that we live on for a short period of time called our planet. So if we're feeling attacked, one of the things I say is, and I think I've mentioned this to you guys before, it's a term that we call projective identification. This is what projective identification means in the clinical world. It means that people project onto you, and in order for you to actually take it in, you have to identify with it, and then you begin to internalize it. But if you don't take it in, if you reject it, then that projective identification can't take up residence in you, subsequently not allowing folks to live rent-free in your head. And so that's really, really important, whether you're having a one-on-one conversation or whether you're in a dialogue on social media. You've got to not take that stuff in and personalize it or internalize it. You know, in social media, sometimes we become these, I like to call it badasses, like, you know, or the Wizard of Oz syndrome, where we're behind the curtain and we're saying all these negative things, not just 45, many of us. And sometimes we need to check ourselves and determine if we're going to be, as we like to say, are we helping to harm or healing the hurt? Will you be a helper and a healer, or will you cause harm to people with your words and your actions? You know, I don't want to talk about politics. What should I do? Oh, that's a question out there that Britt has said. I don't want to talk about politics. What should I do? Well, if you're in a social setting or you're talking with a person, you can say, listen, let's just change the subject. I'm really overwhelmed with politics. I want to talk about something positive. And if you find yourself around people who don't want to talk about anything positive, then you're kind of in bad company. So think about this. Based on the company we keep often indicates our health and well-being. And sometimes if we're hanging around the wrong kind of people that are not speaking life, truth, love, and light into us, then we might need to change our crew. That doesn't mean that we don't pray for those folks, but sometimes that negative energy can be really, really toxic, and ultimately it can bleed into and manifest into negative mental health. So we've got, I think, one last question that I think some of the crew came up with before. Is it really mental health illness when we see it depicted in our media? Like the shootings in the schools, that's a really good one. The shootings in the school, or when something happens and they say it's just mental illness. Well, here's what you should know, that a lot of times those persons that have behaved in the manner of, you know, the multiple shootings and things like that, yes, many of them do have mental illness, but by and large, the average person with a mental health illness does not go around shooting up schools. They're not really violent. They're not harming anyone, you know, and quite frankly, it could be that the healthiest person, and I think this is really important to say, and this is a good way to wrap this up, the healthiest person out there is the person who knows that they have a mental health issue, maybe even a mental illness, and they're courageous enough to do something about it. That's the courageous conversation. And if you know someone, will you be courageous? Will you be their friend and have the conversation with them and say, listen, I will help you to get to the resources that you need to help you to deal with your mental health issue? Because I've never met a person, including myself, that did not have some kind of mental health issue, including depression, anxiety, panic attacks. All of that stuff is real because we're human beings. We're actually spiritual beings having a human experience. And that human experience takes us on all kinds of twists and turns and ups and downs, trials and tribulations, all kinds of stuff jumps off. And so, you know, our life is just not one steady plane. It's peaks and valleys. And when those valleys happen, the hope is that we're around people that can support us, that won't leave us hanging, that won't abandon us, and can have the hard conversation with us saying, listen, I love you. I want to support you. Something's going on, and I want to help you to get help. That's what I thought should have happened when it came to Kanye West. And I think it still should happen. He's a human being. Someone loves him just like any of us. We all want to be loved and want to be affirmed. So we need to reach out and to support each other. Listen, this conversation is not going to end, because guess what? We're going to be coming to you every single day, engaging you in the Courageous Conversations Connect series. What does that look like? That means although tonight we were having Mindful Mondays, tomorrow is going to be Testimonial Tuesdays, where you get to ask questions about what we want to talk about, or we're going to talk about on Wednesday. And Wednesday is what? Work It Out Wednesday. So we're going to take all of your questions from Testimonial Tuesdays, and you can share your own testimonies. It can be anonymous, or you can share your name if you so choose. There's going to be a link that's put out, and in that link, click it, and then share either your questions or your testimonies. We're going to work it out on Work It Out Wednesdays. We're going to come to you at 7 o'clock live on Wednesdays. And then on Thursdays, we're calling it Thoughtful Thursdays. That's where we have points of power and wisdom, and we're inspirational. And we just want to share things that are going to inspire you to live your best life. And then on Friday, we wrap it up with Freedom Fridays. That's where we come to you again, because this is not a monologue, it's a dialogue. So we want to hear from you on Freedom Fridays about the conversations that you want us to have in the following week, just like you shared with us this past Friday. So that's how we're coming to you. We want to have the courageous conversations. Look out for all the master classes that we're going to be doing, and look out for all of the engagement that we're going to be having throughout the week. Listen, I'm Dr. Argie, and I am here for you. So let's have this conversation, this courageous conversation together. Have a beautiful night on purpose, from my heart to yours.